So today we're going to be talking about the narcissist's favorite weapon called guilt. But we're also going to talk about the four other ones. There's going to be five that we're going to cover, but I want to really do a deep dive into particularly guilt tripping. And before I started researching guilt tripping, I really thought that it wasn't something I was highly susceptible to, that it wasn't a big part of my experiences with the narcissist. And then once I started doing a deep dive into guilt, oh man, yeah, I've been guilted and guilted very successfully. I think it's something that we all struggle with, and I'm hoping just to sort of expand our awareness of what guilt tripping looks like, how to recognize it. But I want to first just give you an overview of the narcissist's five top psychological weapons. And but before I get started, I know a lot of you, maybe I know you still are coming in, but I made a big stir, so I'm gonna offer this at the top because I did this on TikTok, but I haven't posted this anywhere else. But I made a big stir yesterday by posting content about Lundy Bancroft. And this came after somebody tagged me on one of my videos saying, hey, have you seen the Facebook page, the post that has just come out about him? Which actually, it isn't new news, it's old news. The problem is it's been news that we've been ignoring, and it's news that we've been around. For those of you who remember, I think it was in 2023 in February, I'd actually scheduled him to be an event speaker, and then I canceled it. And the reason I canceled it was because two separate parties came to me and said he has problems, that he's been abusive to them, and that they highly recommend that I not have him on my platform. So I at first I don't like canceling anybody, not literally or not figuratively. And I was even kind of irritated. But when I heard more of the story, I was really deeply concerned. And so when this post came out 3 days ago, and how you can find it, if you'd like to see the post, it's if you go to Facebook and then search for A Cry for Justice, and you look for 3 days ago, she posts a video, a live video, not live, I shouldn't say that. It was a YouTube video made by a person who was somebody that had been abused by him a long time ago, actually. It occurred a while ago, which is very disturbing. And since then, I have heard from at least one other victim who's contacted me and thanked me for saying something. I also know one of the victims personally. So there are more than one person. This is not just one person's bad experience with with Lundy Bancroft. This is multiple people. I know it's disturbing when we hear one of the big people that we see as pivotal. In fact, Lundy Bancroft's book, Why Does He Do That? I read that right after I got out of that toxic relationship, and it really revolutionized my view of abuse and abusive men. It's disturbing when we hear somebody who has been so influential in informing you about abuse is possibly abusive as well. Unfortunately, and I don't really understand the full mechanism psychologically why, but this is not the first time this has happened. There are other people who have been pivotal in various areas of society that when you look at their own personal life, there's been grave moral failures, very grave moral failures. So it's not, unfortunately, a unique situation, but it is a troubling one. And I think what troubled me the most, and this is why I'm talking on it, has been that we as women tend to, I know I did too, like fantasize, romanticize men who seem to be good men, that we somehow like they finally somebody is speaking up, and there's some like good voice out there, and that this is going to like make a difference. Like not everything is dark and not everything is bad. And then we get attracted to them. We psychologically find them extremely appealing, and we give them a lot of credibility, a lot of attention, just a lot of admiration, and we tend to also be open to relationships with them because there's power by proxy. Because a lot of us as women, even think of the fact that if you go find A Cry for Justice on Facebook's post 3 days ago, the woman she's posting, she has her own take, which she says this is not new information, But then she posts this woman's just recent video, YouTube video of a description of what happened to her. And when you hear how old the story is, it's not a new story. And the problem is that she's been disbelieved. We don't get believed. When we come forward, we don't get believed. So when there's a man who comes forward and represents us and seems to be the voice for us, we then think, oh, great. Here's somebody that I can then find safety with. Here's somebody I can find credibility with, not realizing that it's not going to be found in there. It's in elevating our voices, not elevating their voice. We're the ones who experience the oppression as women. We're the ones who primarily are targeted and assaulted or unalived. And it is we that we need to promote. Our voice we need to promote. So that was really the point that I wanted to make about all of that. And I just wanted to clarify it because a lot of people were saying, where is the post? How can I find out more about it? Well, you can find it by going to Facebook's A Cry for Justice and look for 3 days ago, and you'll find this posting on Lundy Bancroft. And like I said, it's actually old news. That's the scary part. There are lots of victims. There's not one victim. There are lots of victims. I happen to know of, now I know 4. So I know 4 different cases. One of the woman that was reported in the video, as well as somebody who contacted me, and then as well as somebody personally, and then someone else. So it's not just one off. This is a problem. And as I said, we need to stop trying to find power by proxy. We need to be finding power by elevating women's stories. So I didn't post it elsewhere. I will go ahead and it's a long video and I'm just shocked, frankly, that it's done so well on YouTube. I think it's almost 100,000, and because it's a 5-minute video. But that's a good point Jess is making. Doesn't matter that the book is helpful. And even the person, A Cry for Justice, makes the same point. Can we ignore who wrote it and find what they did a good thing, even if they're not good? Well, that's an interesting point. Here's the worry I have. The worry I have is by elevating the book, I can't post the link, Little Samurai. It's too long. I've tried multiple times. If you look in the video, I've multiple times listed where to find it. A Cry for Justice on Facebook. A Cry for Justice on Facebook. But if you think about, can we separate the work from the one who wrote? I mean, I'm thinking about Neil Gaiman this last week, that big article that came out on him and how shocking that is. What happens when we elevate a person's work? Are we rewarded? I don't know. I find that whole thing murky. I'd love to hear more of your opinion on that, because here's the thing. I know that all of us are very grateful for the book. Like I said, it was revolutionary for me, but there are other good books. He's not the only book on it. Another good one I like a whole lot is Don Hennessy, called How He Gets Into Her Head. It's actually a more specific book of targeting and grooming that happens in toxic relationships, based on Don Hennessy's work as an Irish law enforcement officer working with DV for, I think, 40 plus years, 30 or 40 plus years. So yeah, it was very validating to me. I mean, I remember finding how many negative, how many characteristics of abuse my ex checked. He had a majority of them. I think like Lundy Bancroft identifies 9, and mine had like six characteristics. So yeah, it was very eye-opening, but I think we need to be careful about how we elevate some people's voices and dismiss the voice of victims. And we do it ourselves. We really do this ourselves accidentally. We shouldn't do that. The name of the book that I just mentioned, I think it's an extremely good book, is called How He Gets Into Her Head. How He Gets Into Her Head by Don Hennessy. So let me now switch tactics and switch topics and jump into the narcissist's favorite weapon. And if you could share this so we can get this a little bit bigger audience here, I'd really, really appreciate it. I think the topic of guilt tripping is the biggest one I want to get into, but I also plan to cover everything else. I want to cover the other 4 tactics. So that's the first thing I'm going to start off with, is their 4 favorite tactics. And then we're going to really extensively get into guilt tripping. Please be aware, I'm battling through not feeling good. Again, I'm just really struggling with feeling lousy. I've been feeling lousy for nearly 2 weeks now. I'm doing better, thank goodness, but you'll hear the congestion and I probably will, I don't know, I'll sound like I'm fighting through a cold. So please forgive me for that. But okay, their top favorite tactic to use against you is gaslighting. And we all know that, which is, oh, thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate that gift, which is when they distort your reality, they make you doubt your perceptions, memory, feelings, and they destabilize your sense of self and make you questioning your own judgment. And all of that is just to make you easier to control. I know that I'm being guilt tripped when I feel like that I'm feeling confused and I'm questioning myself. So I walk away from something that makes me think, what really happened just happened there? Or maybe I got it wrong. I know that's a pause. Now, does that mean I was guilt tripped? Guilt tripped? Maybe. I'm sorry. Does that mean I was gaslighted? Maybe, maybe not. But it does make me pause and start to ask some big questions. And some of the examples of guilt tripping, because here's the thing. So let me just boil guilt tripping down. Guilt tripping takes the problem and substitutes you for the problem. So you bring up an issue, whatever it is, and it could be something just simply like, hey, aren't we going to such and such and such and such? And you're like, no, I never said that. But it substitutes you thinking, addressing the issue or the problem, and it makes you the issue. And so some practical examples of what that looks like is, I never said that, or you're overreacting, I didn't mean it that way, or it never happened, you're just making stuff up. You're too sensitive, it really wasn't that bad, or I think you're crazy for thinking that because I would never do something like that. So watch out for them denying a past experience, twisting your words, questioning your memory, minimizing your feelings, or blaming your perception. Those are all examples of gaslighting, one of the favorite things that narcissists really love to do. Here's another thing that narcissists really, really love to do, and that's triangulation. So think of triangulation like a stool. Now, a stool has a minimum of 4 pegs on the bottom of it. I'm sorry, 3 pegs on the bottom. A 2-peg stool is unstable, so a great way to stabilize it is to add the 3rd leg or the 3rd peg. A narcissist or someone who has more of a toxic personality is unstable, psychologically unstable. They need stabilization by adding that 3rd variable to make it more like propped up, make it more secure for themselves. So that's when it could be even another person or imagined opinion. Maybe they're going to bring their past history of credibility. They're going to do something that might incite jealousy or rivalry. And what it does is it makes you feel off balance. It's a very disempowering experience, a very empowering experience for them, but it disempowers you. So here's some example of triangulation, like that comparing you to someone else. My ex would never have acted that way, or I have never experienced anything like this before, or in all the years of experience, this has never happened like this before. They'll do it by creating jealousy, and that may be where they'll say, you know what, I feel so much closer to so-and-so, or so-and-so gets me way better than you, or I don't have problems like this with so-and-so. So they'll stir up jealousy by making you feel less than someone else. They'll use another person's opinion. Well, you know what? Everybody agrees with me that you're being difficult. It's not just me. I remember when that happened, when they said, you know, people have been talking about you behind your back, but I'm coming to you to sort of save you from yourself, to let you know that that's happening. So be really careful about using other people's opinion. They'll pit people against you, like that. Like I just also gave that example. They say they've been talking about you behind your back, or your friends are not really your friends, or I think you should know what this person's actually saying, or your partner isn't as, it doesn't have you as, is not as loyal to you as you think, or if you knew what I knew, you know. So you'll see that kind of like pitting people against each other. Or they'll be triangulate by giving selective attention, like praising one person while obviously ignoring you in order to provoke insecurity with you. So they'll sort of like, they'll highlight another person's success or achievement or accomplishment, and you know that they're not talking about you, because that's like on purpose to let you feel worse than, or like, oh, look what a good writer she is, or wow, I really appreciate the way she's so good at communication. And you know, that's a direct dig at you, because they're saying to you that you're not a good communicator. Here's the book that I recommended at the top of the hour is How He Gets Into Her Head. That's the book I recommend instead of Why Does He Do That? Okay, the third psychological weapon that narcissists love to use is projection. Now, a lot of us have talked a lot about projection. Projection is really when someone has their own stress or negativity or behaviors they feel insecure around, and they accuse you of doing the very thing that they're doing themselves. It's usually a way to deflect and avoid accountability by shifting the blame to you. So here's some examples of it. It kind of sounds complicated until you hear it, and then you suddenly like, oh my goodness, I get projection. So think of someone who accuses you of lying when they lie frequently. They'll say to you, you can't be trusted, when you know they're the one who can't be trusted. They'll claim that you're being selfish because you're not willing to compromise, and yet this is a person that doesn't compromise about anything, that they just come down hard on something, but then they'll say, you're just being so mean because you're not being more collaborative with them. They'll say something like, you only think of yourself. They'll blame you for cheating when they're the one who's unfaithful. The person who's super edgy about what are you doing and who are you talking to and who was that on the phone, and yet you find out they're the one who's been seeing somebody else behind your back. They'll say you're overly dramatic. Well, this is one that happens a lot to us. And I bet you most of the time we don't even recognize it. They'll say you're being over dramatic, but they're the one bringing up the incident of being over dramatic and creating a crisis around it. So they'll say, stop making a big deal about everything, but they're making the big deal. It wasn't a big deal until they said it. In fact, even there are some people who will do that kind of proactively. Like they'll say, I don't want any drama in my life. And by just saying that, they provoke the drama with you in that moment, which is the projection of, I don't want drama, but I'm creating the drama. And then they'll accuse you of being controlling when they're actually being the manipulative one. Like they say, you're always trying to control me and tell me what to do, when actually that's not what's actually happening. It's something very different, but they experience it that way. But since they experience things around control and sensitive around it, they'll then accuse you of control when actually you're not the one trying to control anything. So that's the third weapon that narcissists love to use. The fourth one is the silent treatment. And boy, I didn't have this used against me until I was in that toxic relationship with my for those of you who don't know my story, I was widowed nearly 10 years ago. It's kind of shocking to think of that. He died June of 2015. So I've been almost a widow for 10 years. It's amazing to me. But I got married again 2 years later and was in that relationship for 2 years. Just the worst relationship of my life. Just couldn't have been more scary and terrified in that relationship. And that was the first time I was really experienced stonewalling or the silent treatment. Now, I want to stop for a second because there are two reasons why people can give the silent treatment. I want to first give you the innocuous reason. John Gottman, for those of you who really want to do a deep dive into this, please check out John and Julie Gottman's work. They really talk a lot about, thank you guys so much for that gift. They talk a lot about this type of emotional overwhelm that looks like stonewalling, but it actually is not. Now, just because I gave a caveat to anyone who gets emotionally overwhelmed and shuts down, that I'm not giving you permission to do that. You still need to circle back and complete the conversation, even if it's a difficult conversation for you. But let me talk about the first type that's innocuous and not actually abusive, but something else. There's a group of us, if you think of the fight or flight symptoms, that when we get stirred up, there's a group of us that like to flee. And when we flee, one of the ways we can flee is we just want the conversation to go away. And we just sort of like, we just shut down and we don't know what to say and we become emotionally overwhelmed. Like I said, John and Julie Gottman has focused a lot on this. They actually worked with couples who struggled with this and found that when they watch like a pulsometer in the room with their marital couple or the couple in the room, they can, if one person's like heart rate goes super high, they'll actually put a pause on the conversation. So when that happens, the best thing that you can do, if you're somebody like that who just becomes like flooded, like emotionally flooded, is to take a 30-minute break and ask your person that you're having conflict with for a 30-minute break. Take the break, go think about something else, calm down, do some deep breathing, and then circle back and finish the conversation. Just because we get emotionally overwhelmed doesn't mean we get an out and we don't need to deal with the conflict. So it's not a pass that you get to avoid conflict. It just means that you need to find a different strategy to find a better way to work through whatever upsets you. Okay, so that's the innocuous form that is not with a narcissist. Okay, that's not what's happening with a narcissist. With a narcissist, they're using silent treatment for a very different reason. They're using silent treatment because it hurts. It's a withdrawal of their presence and a withdrawal of their attention and their affection. And it's to maintain a control over you by leaving you feeling abandoned, anxious, and desperate to reestablish the connection. Exactly. I agree with you, Lisa. It is punishment. Narcissists do it as a way to say, my presence in your life is selective. And if you just disturb me in any way, I'm going to go silent. And you're right, April, I agree with you. Often this silence is, you feel the rage. It's like silent rage. So you know they're enraged and they're not acting on the rage, but they're using silence as a way to really drive home the point and to punish you. Some examples of stonewalling, because it could be just, you think, oh, it's just they storm out of the room. No, it's not simply that. There's other examples. I agree with you, Meryl. It fosters incredible insecurity. It could be that they're ignoring your calls and texts after an disagreement so that you feel like there's an abrupt withdrawal. They're walking out of the conversation mid-sentence, mid-conversation, and avoids accountability. They refuse to engage with you even after you apologize with them. And even if you did nothing wrong, even if you're trying to like bridge the gap between them and you, they don't do it. They use you to beg, use the silence to make you beg for forgiveness and beg for them to please talk to you. And they'll act cold and indifferent in group settings to publicly punish you without directly confronting you. So you may find that they're friendly to everybody else in the room, but they are cold to you. And so you feel like you've been frozen out. You know, everybody else is in this person's like almost like a fire. They get to draw close to that individual, but that individual treats you like you're not allowed up near the fire. And it's so hurtful because you feel really rejected when it happens. So those are the other 4 strategies that narcissists use besides guilt tripping. But I really want to get into guilt tripping because I thought, like I said at the top of today, that the guilt tripping wasn't something I was super vulnerable to. I thought that it was, I didn't think it happened a lot to me. And then the more I started digging into it, thinking, oh my goodness, it's happened a whole lot to me and I never realized it. So what is guilt tripping exactly? So I want to really do a deep dive into it because I think it's so important. Guilt tripping is a way somebody uses you to feel bad about yourself. I want to use another word instead of guilt because I think guilt in itself is kind of loaded. I mean, we think we know what guilt is, but maybe we don't. That's what I think there's where the error was for me, was that I thought, oh, guilt means I feel bad that I did something wrong. And I usually attribute it to my own actions. I don't really often attribute me feeling bad about another person as feeling guilty, but I'm realizing I should. So guilt tripping is when we make another person feel really bad in some way, like they did something wrong, by implying that they are selfish, ungrateful, wrong for not meeting specific expectations or demands. It can be explicit, like accusing somebody of being inconsiderate, or subtle, like making passive-aggressive remarks that imply disappointment. So when you start to think about it that way, it's like, whoa, you know, there's a lot of things that make us feel inconsiderate in a relationship that maybe we haven't considered a form of guilt tripping. Here are some ways that guilt tripping shows up. It can be emotional manipulation, like they can play off the victim, exaggerating the suffering or sacrifices they've made, which makes you feel responsible for their emotions. Like, this is how I get repaid after all the sacrifices that I've made. Boy, I've heard that one. It's very toxic when you hear that. Or undermining your boundaries, like they suggest that you're being selfish or unloving when you set a boundary. When you say, like, I guess you just don't care for anybody but yourself, would be an example of undermining your boundary. Like you say, you know what, it's not, I don't want to come over on Saturday. I really think it's best that I opt out. And then they'll say, I guess you don't care about anybody but yourself. So everybody's going to be disappointed that you're not at a family get together. But I guess all that matters is that you're comfortable. That would be an example of undermining your boundaries. They may shift responsibility. They'll say things like, I wouldn't have acted that way if you hadn't made me feel so insecure or so unappreciated or so whatever, you fill in the blank. So instead of not being accountable for what happened between the two of you, they focus on you instead of focusing on the interaction between the two of you. Then there's the victim complex, which is they often frame themselves as unfair treatment. Like, I always get treated like I don't matter. And it's somehow designed to make you want to feel like you need to overcompensate. And they'll exploit your empathy, which they'll make you feel like that you're letting them down or causing problems for them. And just the fact that you're letting them down makes you feel so bad that you feel like you want to bridge the gap and make up so that you don't like somehow, hurt them in some way. So here's some examples. So what I want to do is, Heidi, I agree with you. Like I said, when I got into this, I had no idea that guilt tripping's been used against me a lot, and I had no idea that it was happening. And I think this is what I really hope that we all take away from this, is to recognize it faster. Because what I want to end today, I know normally I outline of what we're going to cover, but because I talked about Lundy Bancroft at the top, for those that missed it, this is taped. You can always see the replay on Facebook or on YouTube. So if you'd like to hear more about what happened with Lundy Bancroft, why I made the post that I did yesterday on TikTok, please see the replay of this and you hear more of my background about it. But when I started doing a deeper dive into guilt tripping, I realized that when somebody feels bad, I feel bad. And I feel bad, they feel bad. So then I want to make up. And then I didn't realize that's a form of guilt tripping. That it's not really my responsibility to take care of another person's feelings. And when they put that out there, make me feel like it's my responsibility, that's a form of manipulation. And I need to really start to see that more clearly, that that's manipulation. So here's some common examples of it. And then I want to wrap up before we take your questions today about what to do, how to unstick it, how to undo the process so you can really challenge it and realize that you're being guilt tripped. Somebody asked about how my trip to Europe was and what it was like to meet Dr. Romany. I'd be happy to answer that question, Kate, at the end. Which is, I was sick the entire time I was in Europe, man, and I came home even sicker than I went. But yeah, I would love to talk about it. It was great meeting Dr. Romany. I'm hoping, I have emailed her, and so is the podcast has emailed her. I'm really hoping we hear from her to set up an appointment for the interview. She said she would, so I'm taking her at her word, but I also know that she's just gone through this massive LA fire and, a lot. And then she went on that trip, and she has a life, she's busy. So I'm hoping I hear from her at some point. But here's some common examples of guilt tripping. Playing the victim. I'm going to give you actually examples. I guess I'm not important to you anymore. Or nobody ever thinks about how I feel. After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me? I'm always the one who gets hurt. It's fine. I'll just handle it on my own like I always do. Do you hear all the guilt tripping there? That makes you feel like, puts them in the victim position. Okay, implied ingratitude. You'd think after I'd sacrificed so much, you'd show a little appreciation. After I'd given up so much for you, you can't even do this one thing for me? I thought you cared for me. I guess I was wrong. I didn't realize how lucky you were I don't think you realize how lucky you are to have me. Other people would be grateful to have someone like me in their life. So there's implied ingratitude. Okay, shaming independence or boundaries. If you loved me, you wouldn't need so much time for yourself. You must not care about this relationship if you're willing to walk away like that. I guess you don't need me anymore now that you're doing well. You're so selfish. It's always about you, isn't it? I can't believe you abandoned me just when I needed you the most. So that's shaming independence or shaming your boundaries. Here's an example of shifting responsibility. You made me act this way. You know how mad it gets me when you say stuff like that. I wouldn't have had to say that if you weren't always pushing me. This is your fault for making such a big deal out of nothing. I wouldn't be so stressed if it wasn't so difficult, if you weren't so difficult all the time. If you had just listened to me, none of this would happen. So that is an example of shifting responsibility. Okay, implied obligation. You'd do this if you really cared for me. I thought friends or family or partners were supposed to help each other. I guess loyalty doesn't mean much around here. Well, I've always been here for you. Is this how you repay me for that? So those are examples of implied obligation. I wondered about that, Kerry, how triggering all this was going to be to hear these examples, because of like, oh crap, this is, you're being like right there. I had the same reaction, like, well, these are really triggering me too. Okay, comparing you to other people. At least we could stop and laugh about it, so we can take a moment like to breathe to collectively together. Okay, comparing you to other people. Why can't you be more like so-and-so? They don't treat me like this. Or everybody else seems to get it. I guess you're just too selfish to see that. Or other people appreciate me more than you seem to. Or no one else has treated me this badly. So that's when they're using comparison against you. All right, exaggerating their sacrifice. I gave up everything for you. I don't know how much I had done. You don't know how much I've done to keep this relationship going. You wouldn't be where you are today without me. I've put my whole life on hold for you, and this is the thanks I get? So watch out for exaggerated sacrifice. Lisa says, my ex is channeling through me. Oh man, I'm sorry, Lisa. Okay, feigning selfishness or feigning selflessness. I didn't do this for me. I did this for you. I don't care about myself. I just want to make sure you're okay. I don't need much. I just wish you could appreciate the little things I do ask for. I could never think of myself, but no one seems to notice. Okay, threatening emotional consequence. This is what this sounds like. I guess I'll have to live with being miserable. I guess if I feel like this, imagine how if I feel like this, imagine how awful it must be for me. I don't know if I'll ever recover from this. Fine, I'll just stay out of your way from now on. So that's emotional consequence, when you feel like someone's going to shut you down for whatever you just set the limit around. Tying morality to behavior. Here's some examples of that. Good people don't treat other people like this. I guess I just believed you were better than this. You're supposed to be a kind person, but look what you're doing to me. What kind of person acts this way? So those are examples of tying morality to behavior. Here's using religious or cultural expectations against you. We're almost done, guys, so hold on. There's 12 more to go, and then we'll be done with these examples. A good daughter or a good son or a good partner would never act this way. And this is what's wrong with the world today. People don't have any respect. God would not approve how you're treating me. It's your duty to do this. You don't get to say no. So that's using religious or cultural expectations. Subtle manipulation. That is, it's okay. I'm used to being let down. Or I didn't think you'd actually leave me hanging, but I guess I was wrong. I'm sure you're too busy to think about me. I just want to let you know how much this is hurting me. That's subtle manipulation. And the last one is undermining your boundaries. And that is, I guess your time is more important than helping me. Or you never used to be so cold and distant. You've changed so much, I don't even recognize you. I thought you cared more about this relationship than that. So that's examples of how they undermine your boundaries. So, all right, so how do we stop this? Because that's really the pivotal question. Guilt tripping is happening a whole lot more than you think it is. It's probably, I have a feeling, actually, guys, when I stand back and think about it, guilt tripping was probably the #1 psychological weapon that every narcissist I have known in my life has used the most frequently. I think it's the most poorly recognized, but the most frequently used manipulation is to use your feelings, use your empathy, use your sensitivity against you to make you feel bad, so that you go then out of your way and sacrifice yourself or betray yourself in some big, massive way. So how do we watch for this? And yeah, LT, it is a bit like shaming, but I also think it's more than shaming. It's use of shame to make you then do more. So it's not just leaves you feeling bad, but it makes you want to do more. So here are some things to really watch out for. First of all, recognize an emotional shift inside you, that something changed inside you. Notice that suddenly that you've become more burdened. Maybe you feel more anxious. Maybe you're feeling like you're really responsible for somebody else or the problem or the feeling or the situation. Notice how suddenly the shift moves and you feel like you're being pulled in. And I want you to also notice how it makes you feel. Like, are you feeling ashamed or obligated? that's when you should stop and ask yourself, am I being guilt tripped by this person? Is this person shifting responsibility for their position, their emotional well-being, maybe their behavior? Are they shifting it from them to me, that now I have to make them feel better or differently because they don't want to do the work of that? I want you also to listen for key patterns. So key patterns that should tip you off this might be guilt tripping is when someone starts to play the victim. They put themselves in like, this is happening, like you're doing this to them, instead of seeing themselves. Remember, always remember, when you're dealing with an adult, this is two adults, adult to adult. That person is just as responsible for all the emotional context and issues as you are. If it starts to feel like the positions are like shifting, the power is shifting to where one person's being less than, another, or like in a one down position, or in a like somehow they're the one being attacked because there is an issue. Really watch for this, because that's an example of when there's a pattern of like playing the victim, or they're also exaggerating their sacrifices, or they're using subtle shaming and blaming, or they're tying loyalty and love to you doing something for them to make them feel better. So watch for phrases that make you feel responsible for another person's emotions or reactions. And then I want you, so the first is recognize the shift, listen for key patterns. Now then I want you to evaluate the context. Ask yourself these questions. Is this person trying to shift responsibility to me? Are they framing themselves the victim to avoid accountability? And is their statement or an attempt to pressure or manipulate my choices? So if it starts to be centered around them and their needs or their perceived grievances while dismissing your perspective, then guilt tripping may be happening in this relationship or in this incident. Then I also want you to start listening for exaggerations and absolutes, like I've given up, like all or nothings. It's black and white. There's a right way or a wrong way, like, or they've given all of this up for you. You'll hear always and nevers, and just really like clear-cut black and white language. So watch out for that, because what that does is it really forces you into a defensive position. Black and white thinking or black and white kind of scripting really puts us makes us one down and makes us feel like we want to come out fighting and over explaining and becoming super defensive. So if you start to feel like you want to explain more or say more, like you want to combat what's said and prove them wrong, that chances are you heard an absolute. You may not have recognized that you had, but you had. And then watch out for passive aggressive behavior, which is a sort of like, there's little jabs at you, or they dismiss you, or maybe they'll invalidate you. Maybe they'll act like they don't need you, but just really watch out for the ways that they'll kind of make you feel like you failed. And it's a way of being angry with you without really like taking you on directly. And also check for conditional affection. Like, now are you somehow feeling like you're going to be in a doghouse with them? This person's not going to like prioritize you, that somehow that you've fallen from favor for them. And watch what their reactions are to boundaries. So they don't handle boundaries well. They'll often like make you second guess yourself, make you feel like you're hurting them because somehow that they feel like they're disappointed that there's this confrontation. They often like really react poorly because they'll use let me say that again. They'll use some form of emotional appeal to make you second guess your decision. Like, so watch out for something that makes you feel like you're hurting them, even though you remind yourself why you had that initial discussion. You're not hurting them. You're bringing up a point. They'll act like they're hurt because they don't really want to take accountability. And then gauge their intention. What are they really seeking? Are they actually seeking resolution, or are they asking you to give up your position? So healthy people look for resolution. Unhealthy people want you to capitulate and give in. They want you to do it their way instead of meeting in the middle. And then trust ultimately your gut feeling. So when you walk away, do you feel emotionally coerced? Do you now feel more trapped and responsible for this person's behavior or feelings? If you feel like something's off that makes you feel confused or uncomfortable or burdened, chances are then there was guilt tripping at play here. All right, so that was a whole lot. I know I just put a whole lot at you, and I'm glad. I end up wondering if it does make sense. So Wanda, thank you so much for saying it does make sense and it's helpful, because I get to the end of these and I think I hope that you understood what I was trying to say, because it's hard. This stuff, all of this is really, really hard. You know, Meryl, that's such a good point that you're making, that we often get to a place where staying hurts more than leaving. And boy, when we get into these toxic relationships, we do get up to a point where we just end up feeling like, I can't do this anymore. So Louis, you're asking a really great question. How do you leave a relationship like this safely? You do it carefully. You do it with a lot of planning and strategy. That's the way that you have to be intentional. Oh, Heather, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. As an autistic person, I often worry that my voice is too monotone and that I'm a little like when I listen to myself, I put myself to sleep. So I worry that I'm putting you guys to sleep. So I'm really glad this is helpful. But yeah, it's helpful to have a strategy. You know, what I tend to do when I'm realizing this relationship's toxic and that I need to do something to get help, I often like write down all the reasons why it's complicated, all the things, all the issues that sort of make this a very difficult situation, and start to think about it proactively. And that helps me then make it more seem achievable. And, you know, frankly, it is going to be messy, honestly. It is going to be messy. I don't think there is a non-messy way, because anybody who's toxic, or especially narcissistic, is going to have issues with you leaving. They are. They're going to make it hard. They're going to hurt you. You're not going to get out of this without pain, because they're going to make sure that there's mutual mass destruction. So I heard about this style of, I don't know what to call it, style of interactions. Maybe that's what I'll call it. The one that is my favorite, there's two favorites of victims and survivors. And then there are two favorites of toxic people who are really into power and control. So the two favorites of victims and survivors is, we like to either be collaborative. We believe that people can meet in the middle and get along, that everything is possible to get along. And then their other one is that we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for the good of others, believing that others would do the same for us. Big mistake. There's a percentage of the world that would never sacrifice for you, not ever. But those of us who are, you know, open, agreeable, kind-hearted, you know, believe in the goodness of other people, we tend to believe that I sacrifice for you, you're going to sacrifice for me. So those are the two positions that a lot of victims get into trouble. The positions that toxic people and narcissists tend to take is they see the world as they will let you sacrifice for them. They'll take advantage of your offerings. I'm trying to think of how to phrase that. I'm losing that, what that's called. So they're willing to like take the benefits from you, but it's not mutual, or they will do mutual mass destruction. So they kind of it's either competitive, or that's it. It's competitive. Everything's competitive, or they're willing to blow it all up so that everybody's destroyed in the process. And that's what a lot of us experience when we start to separate from a narcissist, is this mutual mass destruction. So unfortunately, there isn't really a good way to get out of these relationships without knowing and anticipating mutual mass destruction. You have to like almost anticipate it and try to like run ahead and think of how can you possibly avoid it to any extent. So Louis, I know I didn't give you like a real good answer, but I hope that's like some kind of an answer. But I would definitely be very strategic in the effort to leave. Yeah, no, Meryl, that's a really good point. So Meryl said they say things like they get it, but what they really want is just you off their back. Yeah, I think what we often miss, and this is something I've been lately talking a lot about, because I just recently wrapped up reading George Simon's book. And I realized my microphone's been far away. Sorry, guys. I don't want to change it because I don't want to change the quality of the sound. It's been bad the whole time, but I realized it's way over here. So guys, on everybody who's been trying to listen to me, I apologize for how crappy the sound has been. But George Simon, in his book called Character Disturbance, in his chapter 5, so in the book called Character Disturbance, chapter 5, he talks about responsibility avoidant behavior. It's an awesome book, guys. I think that book is just worth the purchase for that chapter 5 and 6. Really, seriously. But he outlines like a whole list. He has a list of responsibility avoidant behavior. And yeah, one of the ways in which they say that looks like responsibility taking, but actually is avoiding, it's called character disturbance. Your mom mystic is called character disturbance. It is they'll make it look like they're changing and they're trying that they're getting it and they want things to be better, but actually that's just a deflection and a delay tactic. And the way that you know that is watch what happens down the road. Does it really change? Now, I think that's the question I just recently heard. I heard this on a yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's what it's called. That's the name of the book, Character Disturbance. I heard this on a podcast and I thought this was brilliant. Are they changing or are the tactics just changing? So a toxic person isn't going to change. You're not going to see kinder behavior. You're not going to see checking in on you, following up. They'll get better briefly, but it quickly fades away. But what they do is their tactics change. So they'll first try telling you what you want to hear. Then they'll get mad at you for challenging them. Then they'll gaslight you for bringing it up and acting like it never happened. But yeah, you'll just see the tactics change, but there's not actually change. Because you ask yourself this. I think this is really, really helpful, is when we ask ourselves this question. If you'd done something terrible and you knew it was bad and you felt deeply convicted, you couldn't live with yourself, what would you do how would you show your partner or your family that you're a different person? You would really go to a lot of effort. It's called responsibility avoidance, Phoenix Rising. You would go to a lot of effort. You would make sure that their anxieties were quelled. You would make sure that your accountability was nearly perfect. And if it wasn't, you'd apologize for it. When they feel upset and bring something up because it triggered them, you would then be apologetic and you would follow up on that and feel really bad. You wouldn't be defensive. You would own it. And you would have such a dark struggle with yourself that you personally would be in crisis. That's what a moral crisis looks like, or a psychological personal crisis. What the problem is in these situations is the people that we're in these relationships with who have character disturbances don't have moral crises. They're upset that you're having a crisis. And so what they do is they do whatever they can to make it just to calm you down. It's just to deflect and distract and to avoid any accountability. But they will use tactics that actually look like they're changing when they're really not changing at all. Like counseling. Counseling is a big one that a lot of them use. I'll go to counseling. And they'll go to counseling and you'll see no progress. You'll see no, here's an example of how it looked in mine. And I'll tell you, here's a psychologist. I know what change looks like. I mean, I've sat with clients for 20 years. I've seen real change. I've seen people come into my office broken and become totally really rework themselves around some issue. But my ex fooled me. How did my ex fool me acting like he's changing when he really didn't change? Well, what he did is he used the sound bites that sound like change, but I forgot to ask myself, does the behavior match the sound bites that I was getting delivered? I really want you to kind of pay attention to that. Does the behavior, because if someone's in crisis, they're in crisis. They can't hardly stand themselves. They're in what's called the dark night of the soul, So if you're seeing somebody who's acting kind of laissez-faire, not taking it super serious, very defensive when you bring it up, has no sympathy or empathy for your triggers, doesn't want to have any kind of follow-up about how this has impacted you and hurt you and harmed you, that's not actually change. That's not somebody having a personal crisis. That's just somebody who's doing just enough to be able to get away with doing more of it. Yeah, just like you, Lisa, we went to therapy the entire time. He was in therapy the entire time of our marriage because I found out on our honeymoon that he had been seeing other women. And I learned really fast that it wasn't one woman, it was women. And from the moment I discovered that, we got into treatment, and treatment never stopped. And I'll tell you, he was worse at the end than he was in the beginning. He just got better. He just got really better. So watch out for that. Watch for not a changed person, but a change in tactic. That's a real common sign that this is responsibility avoidant behavior, even when it looks like positive, proactive behavior, And that's the thing. A lot of us are seeing behaviors that we think are positive because, if somebody said to you, well, he's going to therapy or she's going to therapy, we think, oh, they're taking this really seriously. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe or maybe not. But so really watch that. That's why I put out that video, 5 or 7 questions to ask yourself if this change is authentic. Other questions for me about guilt tripping or about psychological warfare. Yeah, they do know how to twist the narrative. They're very, very good. Janet, the thing they think most of us don't understand, I know you're talking to Wanda, but the thing most of us don't understand is that their issue is protection of their image. Their image is what's really, really important to them, not their selves. They're not protecting themselves. They're protecting their image. They don't want anyone to know who they actually really are. And they're also just protecting their way of life. They don't intend to be sensitive and kind to other people. They don't tend to be a better person. They're just protecting their way of life. Yeah, I agree. BSTR997 said, if I win, you win, but they don't see it that way. No, they don't see win-wins is not a win-win. Win-wins is to them a win-lose. They lose if you win because they don't see the world as a fair place. They're jealous of your wins. They see your wins as a takeaway. Yeah, Sayla, I'm so glad you're here and you're here today. And I don't know if Instagram has noticed that I'm now on Instagram each week. I'm really excited to be hanging out with you as well. I see you, big brown eyes. Thank you so much. Yeah, he was seeing someone else while you're in therapy. Yeah, that sounds really very common. Yeah, and Nikki talked about how he did these tactics and even fooled our counselor. Actually, our counselor, when we were in counseling, actually thought that he was doing so well, that we were doing so well, she thought it was time for us to wrap up and stop coming to therapy. And I'm like, wait. No, I said, no, absolutely not. Kate asked at the beginning of today, and I know that we've got 8 more minutes before we wrap up today, but so please feel free to put your questions in today. Is that what was Germany like? What was it like to be in Europe, being filmed in a film and meeting Dr. Ramani? So from January 18th to January 23rd, I was in Germany on a film set for a movie called I Love You, My Narcissist. You may have seen my story post across about that. That movie probably will come out in 2026 or 2027. And it's 2 fictionalized stories that are told, and they break in and share experts' opinions about the story. So I was one of 5 experts, along with Lisa Sunny, Dr. Ramani, Manjeet Ruprai, and then Emma Davey, I think is the other one. So it was really cool. I got to meet, did I get to meet everybody? Yeah, I think I got to meet everybody. It was going to be filmed as the expert. So the movie actually hasn't been filmed, although we know what the story is about. Just the experts' opinions were filmed. So the whole thing was just about filming our opinions, which was really weird. It was weird to walk on the set knowing that you're the person that's supposed to be, they're filming you. You're the expert. You're the focus on. You're the star in that moment. So yeah, it was really weird to have that happen. It was amazing meeting Dr. Ramani. I had a couple meals with her, and I also got to sit next to her while she had her makeup put on. Really kind woman. Brilliant, obviously. We all know that. She's extremely brilliant. But I couldn't have met a more humble, kind, soft-spoken, just amazing person. So she's everything that I ever thought she would be like, she is like. So it was really great meeting her. Super, super great. Just super gracious. I was a little starstruck. I didn't talk much. I don't want to be fangirling, so I didn't. I just was very quiet. The name of the movie is I Love You, My Narcissist, and it's being put out by a private company. called, I don't know how they say their name. I should have asked them pronounce it. It's like Alef Cine. So yeah, I don't know how they pronounce the last or the name of the company, but I'll let you know. Be sure, make sure, be confident that I'll let you know when I know more, so that I can let you know when that movie's out, so that you can be sure that you can see it. I'm nervous though. I'm nervous. I'm always self-conscious. You won't believe it. Here I do all of this, but I get to control what you see and how you see it. And it's, when you're on a movie set, I don't get to control that. So that was weird. They're not being in control of how they see it, what they film. There's angles of myself I don't like. Yeah. So anyway, it is what it is. Somebody asked how something about a good man. Like, how do we know we've met a good man? I think that's a great question. What is really, I think a good man, I've been thinking a lot about that. What is a good man? A good man to me is somebody who doesn't need to say they're a good man. They just act like a good man. I also think it's somebody who doesn't need to, they see everyone as equals. I think it's really hard. It's hard because men are used to transactional relationships. A lot of their relationships are transactional. It's what they get from each other, what they get out of stuff. And I even think they see relationships with women as transactional. And when you do that, that makes it hard, because transactions means that often it's like a consumerism. There's a purchase of something. And then there's value. You put value on something. And I think when we start to put value, that we get into danger, because everybody has infinite value. So I think we need to be really, really careful about that equation of a person's worth is for what they do for you. No, that's not actually what they do. It's because they exist. Everybody has value, has an amazing infinite value that's unable to put any number to. So I think that's what we need to really look for, people who see us collaboratively, for respects us, who just who doesn't need to compete and doesn't want something from us. It just can enjoy being in our presence. And I think that they don't define themselves as good men. I think they just define themselves as human. So I think, maybe it's a reframe, not a refrain. I like that. That's a really great way to put it. Lori, that's a very provocative question. So let me answer that as the final question for today is there kind narcissists? Actually, you can't be diagnosed with, let's first of all separate narcissistic traits from narcissist, okay? I think we get really confused about the difference. A lot of us have a few narcissistic traits. A lot of us do. Not everybody, but a lot of us do. But most people are not NPD. To be diagnosed with NPD, you have to have 5 out of the 9 criteria. And if you look at the criteria, none of them are kind or nice. In lying, deceptive, being jealous, getting even, not controlling impulses, thinking you're better than other people, thinking the rules don't follow you. I mean, none of that. I mean, who wants to be with somebody like that? Very critical. So those are not kind behavior. And in order to be diagnosed with that, you have to be like that. You have to have those characteristics. But I do think that, a lot of us at times can be narcissistic, or have a narcissistic trait once in a while, or get into a place where we're vulnerable and act narcissistic. And I think, we can be kind people, but have bad moments, definitely. So I think that's the big difference. I think that we should evaluate our relationships by how safe this person makes us feel, and whether or not we can really show up as ourselves. And I agree, big brown eyes, you just said my ex could be very kind. So combined, mine could be very kind too, but I'm talking about not an act of kindness here or there that's for selfish motives, for manipulative motives. Like, chances are, I bet you if you and I had a conversation, he was kind when it served him. And I'm assuming it's a he, maybe it's not a he, but this person was kind because it benefited them. They weren't kind for the benefit of the other person, because it didn't do anything for them personally, but they got something out of it. Chances are it made them look good. It garnered, accolades. They were rewarded for it. It did something for them. It wasn't just because. What to me, kindness is what you do when nobody's watching, and you don't have to do it. You do it simply because The act is an expression of who you are. It's not even for what the other person gets out of it. It's just an expression for what you are. It's a gift that you give to another person. But yeah, there's a lot of us that struggle with being kind, or struggle being good all the time. But a person with NPD, they're if really look, if you looked at those 9 criteria, they just don't go together. They really don't. All right, you guys. Next week I'm going to be back at 4 o'clock, and what we will be talking about is I want to talk about traumatic cognitive dissonance. I want to talk about that confusion that you have, that you can't tell what's true or real. So I really want to dig into what is traumatic cognitive dissonance. I'm super excited because next week we're featuring Dr. Peter Salerno again on the podcast. So we're having an interview this week on that. So he will be on the podcast. And I also want to let you know that for those of you who are really struggling healing, you're out of a relationship, but you just are not like where you thought you would be. Maybe you're still battling the rumination. Maybe you're just feeling like you're just not where you want to be. Like you're not sleeping great. Maybe you don't really know for sure what happened. Maybe you can't get closure. There is still room in the Healing Strong February 6th group. There's a couple spots left. I would love to have you guys join us for a 12-week group coaching program with Lisa Sunny, Stronger Than Before, and myself. Yeah, my podcast is called Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. It's everywhere that you look for podcasts. So if you look for Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. In fact, we were this week we broke the top 50 on relationships. So yeah, I would love to have you. I'd love to have you listen to our podcast, but there is a few spots left for Healing Strong. To find it, go to my website, kerrymcavoyphd.com, and then put in /healing-strong/. And if you should be, that's the best way to find it. It's Kerry McAvoy PhD /healing-strong- like /. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Okay, let me do that again. KerryMcAvoyPhD.com /healing-strong/. That's how you find it. So I'd love to have you a part of the Healing Strong group coaching. We're limiting it to 8 people. It goes for 12 weeks, covers things like getting over your anger and rage, how to find closure, how to stop that rumination that happens where you just can't stop thinking about this person. How do you make sure the trauma bond is broken? So please check it out if you think that would be helpful. All right, you guys, I will see you back here next week when we get into confusion. We're going to get into confusion next week. All right, until then, you guys stay safe, be healthy. I will work on getting healthy myself, and I'll see you next week.